We will go ahead and get started with the next session. I hope you're all enjoying the day. In just a few moments, we will invite our keynote speaker, Commissioner Tyler Huebner, to the podium. But before I do that, I'd like to thank Invenergy for being a presenting sponsor for this session. Speaking on behalf of Invenergy is Cooper Johnson. Cooper is the manager of renewable development at Invenergy, where he and his colleagues are leading the transition to a carbon-free future here in the Badger State. Cooper.
Good afternoon. Renew 22, what a fun year. I'm really appreciative of all the effort that Renew put into making a fun in-person event after last year's success virtually. It's good to get back with the whole solar family. Feels kind of like a 10-year reunion that went through this year. So grateful to be up here in person. It's a privilege here sharing presenting honors with all the folks forwarding the renewables agenda here in Wisconsin. Renew's 11th summit brings with it a lot of memories, many of them shared with the eyeballs and foreheads I see out in the audience today here. Hard fought battles, major victories, some setbacks on this road we're traveling come to mind, but solar coaster speech was last year. This year we're looking ahead. I'm Cooper Johnson. I've had the pleasure of working in the business in this state for the past 11 years, and I'm continually astonished at the progress that we've made here. My work with Invenergy takes me around the state, and sometimes, like yesterday, I'm on the interstate. I see trucks carrying the equipment that is building out the renewable infrastructure that will define this moment. When I see transformers or a flatbed full of modules cruising down the highway, I wonder if people from those other states that they're coming from see what I see. I wonder if they know what we're doing up here behind the cheese curtain. I've been working with Invenergy for the past 2.5 years of my career. Over the past 20, though, Invenergy's developed over 29,000 megawatts of capacity across 4 continents. And we're proudly leading the world's leading privately held sustainable energy company. Our ambitions in Wisconsin are just as lofty. We've established a track record in the state with over 1 gigawatt of capacity developed, contracted, and built, creating over 1,000 construction jobs and investing $6.5 million annually into communities across the Badger State. We're proud to have brought online 150 megawatts at Badger Hollow Solar last month. When the second half comes online this year, it'll be the largest single project of its kind in the state. Last fall, construction began in Terrace Solar and Storage in Kenosha County, delivering clean power to the communities just outside the shadows of the state's biggest cold stacks. Darien Solar in Rock and Walworth counties is primed to start construction this spring, energizing my family's home county. Our pioneering ground cover strategy will create a virtual buffer from runoff to nearby Turtle Creek. The future looks even brighter here. Our team is working with communities every day, leading the transformation of our state's energy economy with over 2,900 megawatts of wind, solar, and storage projects in development here. Wisconsin utilities have been clear with their mandates. We will be fully transitioning away from carbon emitting generation by 2050. Over the next 2 decades, there's much to do, and none of us can do it alone. As an industry, we need to work together to promote ideas and generate solutions to the hard problems facing us each day during the process. We need a coalition that will defend the road to a clean energy future in a state where we're open for business to renewables. Invenergy and Renew Wisconsin and all the folks here in this room that are working to forward this mission are helping pave the path to a cleaner Wisconsin. To all the people here today helping to craft this ambitious vision, thank you for your continued support. To all the new faces seeking to do the same, please join us. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Cooper and to Invenergy. It is now my sincere honor to introduce today's highly anticipated keynote speaker. Tyler Huebner was appointed by Governor Tony Evers to be a commissioner at the Public Service Commission in March 2020, and he was reappointed by Governor Evers to a 6-year term, which began in March 2nd, 2021. He's a member of the Energy Resources and the Environment Committee in the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, and is currently Wisconsin's representative on the board of the Organization of MISO States. Prior to joining the commission, Tyler had been executive director of Renew Wisconsin. He began his role at Renew Wisconsin in 2013. And before that, Tyler worked at the State of Wisconsin Division of Energy Services, and prior to that at the U.S. Department of Energy's Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Division. For both the State of Wisconsin and the Federal Department of Energy, Tyler worked in the low-income weatherization program, helping citizens reduce their energy bills. He started his career as a consultant with ICF International. Tyler earned his master's degree in civil and environmental engineering in the atmosphere and energy program at Stanford University, and his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from the University of Iowa. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Commissioner Huebner.
It's great to be here, both in person. I know a number of people are on virtually as well. It's good to be back at in-person events, and I really appreciate the invitation to speak to you today. I'm going to give an update on what's been going on at the Public Service Commission and a little bit about the agency to start. I want to start off with a disclaimer that I use just to let you know my remarks reflect my views only, not the views of the full Public Service Commission or the other commissioners. And today I can't comment on the merits of any open dockets, item, or topic on which I as a commissioner will vote on in the future. So just to set a little bit of foundation, an overview of the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. First off, we are one of, I think we claim the title of the first PSC in the country, which dates back to a railroad commission. But we are one of the longest standing public service commissions in the country. Our role is to ensure safe, reliable, affordable, and environmentally responsible utility services and equitable access to telecommunication and broadband services. We regulate over 600 individual utilities across electric, natural gas, and water. We regulate a lot of municipal utilities. Some states don't do that. We don't regulate the electric cooperative distribution utilities in Wisconsin. We also administer the broadband expansion grants in our state broadband office. I'll speak to that a little bit at the end because it's been such a high priority for our agency and for Governor Evers in his administration. And I want to just point out all the work that's been going on with broadband. And then finally, we'll talk about the Office of Energy Innovation, where we have a bunch of exciting work. It's the State Energy Office. It's our focus on energy program for the state. And I'm a delegated commissioner helping to oversee all the work of those departments. Well, one of the lead stories the past couple of years for this event, as well as work at the Public Service Commission, has been 18 different dockets that have come through with utility scale solar projects. And before 2019, there had not been any that had come through Wisconsin. So there was a lot of learning that was done at the Public Service Commission among staff. But over the past 3 years, we've taken up a really large volume of these construction permit cases. I really want to thank all the staff that have been involved in these, because there's a lot of work that goes into the environmental review, as well as on the acquisitions, the economic justification, just a lot of effort all the way around. So really want to point out and thank the volume of work that our staff has done to move these projects through. And these are the 18, this is the count of those that have been approved so far. The total of that is about 2,100 megawatts of solar. And by my math, if you look at the average capacity factors proposed, that's about 6.5% of Wisconsin's 2020 retail electric sales. So from 0 to 6.5% by the time these are all built, it's probably about a 5-6 year window. So that's the accomplishment that's happened through the Public Service Commission approval of these projects. Oh, good enough. So I'm going to talk about some of the dockets that we have going on at the commission. And the first one I'll bring up is our docket called the Roadmap to Zero Carbon. I'm going to put the docket numbers in a lot of my slides so that if you're interested in learning more about them, you can just look those up on the Public Service Commission website. This is a docket specifically so that we can get our hands around at the commission. What does this transition to a zero carbon future look like, and what are the implications for us as a state agency? As was mentioned previously, I'm sure has been mentioned throughout the day numerous times, Governor Evers has put out an executive order by 2050. Many of our electric utilities, including I think all of our major ones, have put out public statements and commitments to reach a goal of reducing to net zero or zero carbon by 2050. So there's a lot of kind of momentum behind that direction and that year in specifics. But our job at the commission is not just to make that happen, it's to ensure adequate electric supply, reliability, and affordability for all customers. And so I pointed that out on this slide, that this is part of the document that opened this docket, to just let everybody know that we have to work on the roadmap to zero carbon in the context of everything else, all the other responsibilities that we have as an agency. At a high level, this comes from the Department of Natural Resources. They did a greenhouse gas inventory report in 2020. So this was their estimate of the carbon emissions, or their analysis of the carbon emissions in the state of Wisconsin and what the sources of those are. So you can see electric generation up in the upper right at 33%. That's where the goals of our utilities have been announced about electricity. That's what the Governor Evers executive order is about, electricity. And you can see that basically 2/3 of the carbon emissions are not covered by those goals currently in the state of Wisconsin, unless some of those other uses of energy are turned into electric, right? I want to give a sort of a synopsis of where we've been and where we might have to go then. This is a graph that I made, and no one's told me yet that it's wrong. So we're going with it. The DNR report did report from 2005 to 2017 that CO2 emissions from the electric generation sector declined by about 16%. So my math is that that's 1.3% per year on average. So if you start at 2005 and make your way down to about 84% by 2017, and then you want to keep that chart going all the way down to zero by 2050, that's about 2.5% per year. So we basically have to double the annual average carbon emissions that we've been on. And I'm happy to report, thanks to the work of our staff member, Joe Fontaine, who runs our strategic energy assessment, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But he said in the docket, what's been filed, our estimate from 2020 is that we are actually ahead of pace. So the preliminary understanding is that we're going to reach by 2020 about a 37% reduction compared to 2005. So we're a little bit ahead, or maybe dramatically ahead of where, just a straight line curve might otherwise put us. So that's a piece of good news in a chart that you may not have seen yet. We did make some preliminary decisions in this docket, mainly around 4 areas. And the first was utility resource planning and our strategic energy assessment. So in a number of states around us and throughout the country, utilities and their commissions have a process called integrated resource planning, where utilities come in and look out 5, 10, 20 years, depending on the docket or the state, and sort of map out, what units are retiring, what do we need to build to replace it, what's going to be the least cost approach from where we sit today. We don't have that process in Wisconsin. We have something called a strategic energy assessment that does a little bit of that, but doesn't make any binding decisions about, the information comes in, it's analyzed, it's sorted, it's reproduced into a report, but no one is bound by, what the report says. So it doesn't have as much teeth as a full integrated resource plan. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've done to try to beef that up a little bit, or at least get the analysis that we think we need to understand the ramifications and the public interest related to these plans. The second area was performance-based regulation. And this is a fundamental, a different way of approaching how we incentivize our regulated utilities. And so if you think back to when regulated utilities started, electricity wasn't available everywhere. Natural gas 100 years ago didn't exist at all, or it was called manufactured gas if it did, and it certainly wasn't available to everybody. And so in those years, there was actually an incentive to build out. It was deemed a public good. It was better to have electricity than candles for lighting, right? It was better to have natural gas to your home. Is a lot safer than having kerosene or fireplaces or other ways of heating your home. And so it was a public good. And in order to get that investment so that the utilities could build that out, we set up, and most states have set up a model where they're basically incentivized for building out that infrastructure to serve all those customers. And that was deemed a public good. And it still is a public good, especially when it's minus 15 degrees out like it was yesterday, right? But now that it's built out, the question has been raised in a lot of jurisdictions as to, is there a different way to incentivize that maybe, maybe you could do things differently. So we've cracked this door open in Wisconsin. We had a workshop held earlier this month to start trying to understand what other states are doing, what other options are out there, and where we could possibly pilot this concept of regulation and incentive based on performance, based on getting something done that is also in the public interest, that maybe isn't just an incentive for building something new, right? So I'm really interested in this because I think energy efficiency and demand response is an area that we've got a great focus on energy program, but every time we do a potential study saying, well, how much energy efficiency do we have? It's more than what we have a budget for in focus on energy. So I'm curious to see, can we incentivize utilities to do more, to go above and beyond with energy efficiency through some kind of a mechanism like this? So we'll see where that docket takes us. The third area was energy efficiency, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that with focus on energy. We're really folded the work from this docket into our 4-year planning process for the statewide focus on energy program. And then finally, customer affordability. So again, going back to our strategic energy assessment, this is a 6-year lookout. And some of the things we're doing differently this year is number one, we're requesting more information than we have in the past from our utilities on their resource plans so that we can better analyze and understand that. And then secondly, we're having our staff do some independent analysis on resource planning considerations. A component of that is that we've recently put out a request for information to explore obtaining additional modeling tools for the commission staff to be able to use. And that's an important piece, is being able to model what, all the intricacies that are at stake in these kind of resource planning. I mentioned another key outcome of that zero carbon docket was customer access and affordability. And we have done a number of things related to that in the past couple of years since I've been a commissioner. Number one, when the COVID-19 first came around, I guess it was really in 2020, we protected residential customers from being disconnected in that initial phase of the pandemic for about the first year. We took this up numerous times, whether or not we should end that moratorium or allow it to continue. In other words, making sure customers had access to water and heat and electricity. And that lasted for about a year. And then once the winter heating season ended last year, we allowed the disconnections to proceed again. But in the meantime, we had a lot of discussions. And I want to commend the utilities because I think a notable improvement from where we started in March of 2020 to where we ended in April of 2021. A couple things. One, deferred payment agreement. So allowing customers to pay a smaller down payment that they can afford and then spread out the money that they owe over a longer period of time so that they can get back on track. And secondly, we had a few utilities come in with even more kind of sophisticated, what we call arrearage management plans. So I think both of those were steps in the right direction to helping customers get more affordable access to these vital utility services, not just for the pandemic, but hopefully for years to come. On this issue, we're also having utilities in their annual reports that they file with us provide energy burden analyses. We had a partial securitization, which is basically a refinancing of a portion of a coal plant when it was retiring to help lower the interest rate that customers have to pay on that. And affordability is going to remain a key focus in 2022 and beyond for the commission. I'm going to take a drink of water before I move on. All right, so now we're moving past our zero carbon docket to a next docket, which is similarly spawned more dockets and more work. And this is moving into distributed energy. So we had a docket called, and we have a docket called 5 EI 157. This is an investigation of parallel generation purchase rates. This actually came about from a hydropower plant, which has been around for a number of years, I'm going to say a couple of decades, and it had been operating and providing, and it had a contract for years for both electric energy and capacity because it's able to sort of help provide peak capacity. At some point that contract ended, and when they tried to renegotiate, the utility was not interested in renegotiating based on the old terms, but instead said, okay, we have a tariff that will pay you the energy, but not really a very high capacity value. And so that entity came to the commission and asked for a ruling. And the chairperson and I decided, we should open a docket to look at this issue more broadly. It may be beyond just one hydropower plant that we need to look at this issue. And so this docket has really turned into three branches. The first is more directly related to what we call the buyback rates for a facility like a hydropower plant or a biodigester or a solar facility. What rates should they be paid for the energy capacity, or what values are they providing, and what are the rates that they should be paid? And because it involves specific rates, it then becomes an issue utility by utility. You can't set rates for all the utilities at once because that's just not the way that it works for us. So what that turned into then is having all 5 of our major investor-owned electric utilities file separate tariffs, separate dockets on this. So we have those 5 proposals in front of us. I'm sure there will be a robust back and forth about what those rates should be, but those are things that we do on the schedule plan to take up later this year between those 5 different electric utilities. So that's on the buyback rates. We also have a memo that was put out and got public comments on a construction called legally enforceable obligations, which I won't really try to go into, but it has to do with sort of contracting for longer term resources. And then thirdly, we have some ongoing work internally related to net metering that we've directed staff to do. And they're working with some national experts to sort of tee up what could be next around net metering. Is that another policy area that the commission needs to investigate? Also in the area of distributed energy is we are in the process of updating our interconnection rules. Who's heard of interconnection? Okay, most of you. I still remember that this was an issue when I first started at Renew Wisconsin in June of 2013. And I see Don Wickert here. Don was the interim executive director and was getting me up to speed on everything that Renew had been working on at the time. And interconnection rules was one of them. And I had no idea what he was talking about. So that's an aside, but it's in process now. So we've opened a docket to update those, to investigate whether we need some updates. I think it's pretty clear that we do because they were written a long time ago. They had been written a long time ago in 2013 when we Renew and when I started at Renew, but that was a unanimous vote between the 3 of us to open this docket to update those. So that was not contentious. And again, Joe Fontaine on our staff, I want to thank Joe. He's kind of leading the work on that. We have another staff person, Bert Chi. I'm sure a number of others that are working on this with a large stakeholder group. I'm sure many of your entities or at least your industries are represented on the stakeholder group, working to establish and update interconnection rules for distributed generation facilities. So shifting gears, and if you remember that pie chart, we had electric up here and transportation down here, the 33%, the transportation was 24% of our state's carbon emissions. We're doing some stuff on electric vehicles, and we've seen some good progress come through the Public Service Commission. First, before my time, a generic docket was open to investigate electric vehicle policy and regulation. And out of that came an order basically setting the guidance for what we think utilities should put forth if they want to run an EV program. And kind of in parallel with that, we saw Xcel Energy, Northern States Power file some pilots for both residential and commercial and fleet customers. On the heels of that, after that was approved, We Energies and Wisconsin Public Service filed very similar programs. And then just recently, last year, Alliant Energy included some electric vehicle pilots in their overall rate settlement, and those were approved. So there is various pilots out there now for electric vehicles. I know that Department of Transportation is through Federal Infrastructure Act dollars is going to be getting funds for electric vehicle charging station deployment. So there's still a lot of work to do on electric vehicles. This is the progress that we've made so far on that. So now I'm kind of transitioning from the regulated side where we have all these dockets, right? And it's a very formal, quasi-judicial, evidence-based process to determine rates and to determine approvals. We also house the Office of Energy Innovation, and it actually used to be housed at Department of Administration, but about 6 or 7 years ago was brought into the Public Service Commission. And they run a number of programs. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with at least some of them. I wanted to point them out. So we have the Energy Innovation Grant Program. We have the Critical Infrastructure and Community Resilience Microgrid Feasibility Grant Program. We continue to do work on biogas. We did a great biogas survey in 2021. We have an ongoing mandate from the state to work on energy assurance and energy security across the whole state. I'll point out Megan Levy in the audience. She does outstanding work for us on those areas. We have an inclusive community solar pilot with a couple of electric cooperatives. Very exciting about how do we get community solar to lower income customers. And then we've got some great work on our energy statistics. For, I don't know, 30 years, we've put out a great energy statistics book. It's a great volume. It's in printed form, but now in 2022, obviously, a lot of that data, people want to massage it. People want to see it. People don't need the graph on the page. They want to, compare that to something else. And so we're working to get that online in a way that, number one, you can update the data more frequently because we can get data from the federal government, the EIA, they update their data monthly. So, we can have new monthly information kind of populating Wisconsin specific and compare that to historic data as well. So we're working on that project, which is really great. Want to plug our Energy Innovation Grant Program. So last year we made awards. We made 32 awards with $7 million of grant funding. 15 of those awards were in renewables and storage. This is the first time that we really invested in energy storage in Wisconsin through this kind of program. We had about a megawatt. So if that, so a megawatt of energy storage across many projects. I think it was like 8 or 9 projects, right? Yeah. We had 9 energy efficiency and demand response projects. We had 2 electric vehicle projects and 6 comprehensive planning projects. Again, I got my docket number down there in case you want to look it up. We also gave out 15 different grants from microgrid feasibility studies all across the state, spanning some tribes, some local governments, some really exciting projects that are looking at microgrids and community resilience centers. So that's a very exciting program as well. Those grants are out the door basically, and those projects are ongoing. I put a little note in there separately. Xcel Energy has a pilot program now as well related to resiliency and microgrids that we've approved. Looking forward, we just closed our round for the next phase of energy innovation grants, we got over 100 applications requesting over $30 million in grants. So the demand for this program is outstanding. I think it's really a bright spot for the state in this area. And we are planning to take that up hopefully in April to the review process is underway. And hopefully by April, that'll come to myself and my two colleagues, the three commissioners, and we will make a decision to award those grants and get those projects going. One thing I want to commend the team. We've done a great job of getting this on an annual process. So that's very predictable for the marketplace of grantees as well as the builders of these projects, the installers. And so we've been able to do this now. I think this is the third year in a row. We're going to hopefully keep that annual again as we look forward. There's about $11 million left in that pot of money to do another round or multiple. Looking ahead, whether it goes to energy innovation grant specifically or not is to be determined, but there's about $14 million in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act that was passed that will be coming to the State Energy Office through various programs. We're also going to be setting our state energy program 3-year priorities this year. So any those last two, there may be certainly the state energy program, there may be an opportunity for public comment. So those are things that you might want to keep track of as we continue to do that work. So switching gears again to focus on energy, a lot of exciting work going on. It's the 20th anniversary, I think was last year for Focus on Energy. So just a history of success for the program. It continues to be very cost-effective program for the state of Wisconsin, investing in energy efficiency and renewables. Wanted to point out a couple things. Number one, our larger project, what used to be called the Renewable Energy Competitive Incentive Program, or RECIP, we have transitioned that out of a competitive program. And right now, for the last couple of years, RECIP had only been for non-solar renewables, so geothermal, biomass, biogas, projects like that. But what we found was the competition element was actually kind of precluding the Focus on Energy team from giving the technical assistance that they're often able to give to these larger and more complex projects. And so now it's going to be what we call a custom application. And that's very common on the energy efficiency side. It allows our experts, Focus on Energy trade allies, doing the installation to work with the Focus on Energy team and make sure that the right projects are being installed and engineered correctly. So we hope that that's a positive change for the non-solar renewables. And also a reminder, there's a special sector, so nonprofits, schools, government, and Native American tribes and nations can receive up to $81,000 for installing solar. So that's for 2022. And then we're also got a big year in Focus on Energy as we look ahead to, we always plan focus in 4-year chunks. So 2022 is the last year of this 4-year chunk, and then 2023 will start a next 4 years. We did some potential studies on both energy efficiency as well as rooftop solar. The cost-effective energy efficiency savings continue to be available beyond what Focus on Energy can fund by itself. Looking at having Focus on Energy in this potential study for the next 12 years versus not having it, where we end up in 2034 is that we will have saved, if we fund this program for the next 12 years, we'll have 13% less electric usage, 5% less natural gas usage than we will if that program didn't exist at all. 13%, as we talked about the solar at the beginning, that was 6.5% of our electric use. So, and that was 18 projects and a lot of work. So the energy efficiency aspect is a huge chunk of what we can do to meet our future energy needs and to help do it affordably. Secondly, the rooftop solar PV technical potential, the amount of roof space is vast. I think it was about 70% or something like that was the top line of, if you could put solar on all the roofs that are solar accessible, you could meet about 70% of the state's electric usage. The potential scenarios, however, of how much of that is technically achievable, affordable, economic, et cetera, was about 600 to 850 megawatts by 2034. Sorry for the small writing on these. These will be available afterwards. These are all public. So as we look ahead again to setting the agenda for 2023 to 2026, we've got a phased approach. We're looking at kind of 5 topics that we added based on the zero carbon docket and other work. And those are alignment of focus performance goals and program offerings with decarbonization. How much alignment should there be? That's an open question we're investigating. Secondly is electrification programs and offerings. There's a lot of interest in electrifying water heating, electrifying space heating. How much of that should be engaged with focus? That's being investigated. Programs and offering for low-income customers. We have that through focus, mainly for moderate income. The state also invests. We as ratepayers pay into a low-income assistance fund that helps really beef up our federal funds that we get for weatherization to fully weatherize homes for low-income residents of Wisconsin. So how can those all work together? That's a third key issue. The fourth is focus on energy doesn't do what we call demand response. So sort of on short notice, instantaneously being able to reduce the load if there's a peak out in the electric system, a super hot day, super cold day. Focus does not really work on that, but there's certainly coordination between saving energy anytime during the year or all the time during the year with demand response. How can we collaborate those better? And then fifth was utility voluntary programs. So those are all areas that we're going to be evaluating and investigating more than we have in the past couple of quadrennials. And so that's taking some extra work to do. And it's going to mean more comment periods and opportunities for you to weigh in on what should focus do on these topics and more. So we're looking at kind of chunking this out, evaluating those, what we're calling macro policies and priorities in a memo, and giving everybody 2 to 3 weeks of public comment to give us your thoughts on that. Following that, kind of the results of commission decisions we'll be sort of narrowing the funnel down to more implementation related decisions. Again, we'll put out a public comment for that so that the public's, all of your input can come in. We'll continue to narrow the funnel, and our goal is to get everything we need to do as a commission done by early fall of 2022 and give the program as many months as possible to get ready for January 1 of 2023. So that's what focus on energy. It's a big year. Like we said, this is every 4 years that this planning happens. So once you do it, this quadrennial plan, it's kind of set mostly for the next 4 years. So 2022 is a big year for setting the stage for the next 4. One of my other delegations is related to MISO, the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. I should have put a map on here, sorry, but basically North Dakota, parts of South Dakota, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Missouri, Arkansas, and then it kind of whittles its way down to Louisiana, Mississippi, a little bit of Texas. So a huge swath, 40 million customers in that system. And then the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which is the federal regulator. There's a lot going on, These are venues that are a lot farther away from Wisconsin. Their decisions reverberate and have a huge impact for years and decades to come. We as a public service commission and all of our peers that are in MISO have an organization as well because of the impact of all these decisions. The states have an organization, and I'm our representative to that organization, which is called the Organization of MISO States. So some of the big things that are going on. So coming from the federal government's Energy Regulatory Commission, they put out an order a number of years ago related to energy storage resources, basically saying, MISO and the other entities across the country like MISO, you have to find a way to appropriately value and integrate battery storage and other energy storage technologies into the overall grid. Following up on that, they said another order, 2222, which was about distributed energy resources. So energy storage was like one technology. Then they went to sort of all types of distributed energy resources, whether that's solar, biogas, generators, electric vehicles could be included, demand response could be included, a lot of different technologies. How can we aggregate those together and have them play in the whole market of the Midwest or the mid-continent grid, as well as any other similar organized type of market like that? So the energy storage one is moving faster. MISO is planning to have that available here in 2022, summer, fall. So energy storage resources could actually interface with MISO, sell capacity to MISO, sell energy to MISO, okay? The distributed energy resources one is substantially behind that. They're looking at 2025 to 2026 before that's fully implemented. However, there are decisions being made already about how that exactly is going to work. We're very lucky to have staff that are engaged with these issues on a day-to-day basis, and it's their full-time job. So we're watching this. But one of the, I would note that there's a lot of traditional stakeholders, utilities, power providers, some of the renewables industry, but mainly the utility scale industry, and a lot of customer groups that are engaged in these MISO processes. They're not easy to find. They're a little hard to follow. There's a lot of them. There has not been a lot of smaller scale aggregators or distributed generation service providers engaged at this point that I have seen in the stakeholder conversation. So if that's an area that you want to play in eventually in Wisconsin and in the Midwest, you may want to talk to your trade associations or whatnot about, what issues are on the table, how is it going to affect us? To me, the stakeholder process is great when this diversity of opinions are coming forward, bringing these ideas and issues so that regulators and all the other entities can kind of understand what are the implications of the rules that are being set. So moving on to MISO. MISO, outside of implementing what FERC tells them to do, which was the first two bullets, they have ongoing, their large initiative is called the Reliability Imperative. And a couple of major things are going on this year. First is a change forever in the Midwest and in the mid-continent. The peak, when we use the most electricity, has been in the summer. And so kind of all of the, how much can your power plant provide when we need it has all been based on a super hot day in July or August. And that's the way the whole system has been planned. And that's the way all the power plants, coal, gas, nuclear, solar, wind, whatever, solar and wind are a little different, but basically you're accredited based on how likely are you, how much capacity and how likely are you to show up on that hottest day. And what's happened over the past few years is with polar vortexes and weather changes, MISO is seeing that even though the peak in the winter on those super cold days is still lower than the summer, there's so many generators that fail on those days that it's starting to get what they call very tight. The amount of generation that's available and the need is getting really close on certain days. And so that has driven kind of a wholesale shift in how MISO wants to look at this reliability. We can't just look at it in the summer anymore. We have to look at it in the winter too. And so they're proposing to shift from just your generator gets a capacity value just for the summer to you're going to get a capacity value for all 4 seasons. And that's a really big change that has been filed for approval. There are various folks that oppose that or otherwise want to see changes to it. So we'll see where that ends up. But it does have implications, which I'll talk about on my last slide or my last set of slides. Secondly, related to this is what they're calling long-range transmission planning. Has anybody heard of the MVP transmission lines? Okay, well, not many. So about 11 years ago, MISO and all the states, utilities, et cetera, went through a process that resulted in identifying 17 different transmission lines across the MISO footprint, the Midwest, essentially at the time. this is basically version 2 of that. So a lot of those lines were identified in order to move renewable power and reduce congestion, what we call it. So there's areas of the grid where power may be really expensive, but there's not enough sort of straws into or out of that area to move the power out. And what's happened over the past decade, well, really 15, 20 years, is there's been a lot of wind generation built where it's really windy. North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Minnesota. And so there's more wind than they can move out. There's a lot more generation there than they have transmission lines to move it out. So that's one of the issues. And so the long range transmission planning is another piece that's, going to be important for the renewable industry going forward. There's a lot of FERC stuff on transmission, so I'm going to move ahead on that. FERC is also going to increase its focus on cybersecurity. That may ultimately have implications for both large and small scale, making sure that, for example, your inverter passwords can't be hacked and people can't get into the grid one way or another. I said I'd talk about broadband. Over the past 7 years or so, with a huge investment in the last 3, we've awarded 363 projects to expand broadband throughout the state. $178 million of grant funds. That's leveraged about $220 million of private funds. 148 of those projects are completed, and in total, we're going to serve about 336,000 homes and about 23,000 businesses with enhanced internet service. Last year, the governor declared it the year of broadband access, and we did a lot of work. I was very pleased. I was with the governor the last 2 days as we awarded some fairly large sized checks, both fiscally and physically, one of those big lottery checks, to a few different grantees from the round that he allocated out of the American Rescue Plan Act funds. So we're very excited to see those broadband projects move forward. We have a grant round open for another $100 million allocated through the state legislature and the budget process. Those applications are due March 17th, and we're going to keep working on this as a state and as an agency. Okay, so I know you probably have a few questions. I'm going to try to do 5 minutes, and then we'll do 10 minutes of questions. And I know that there's probably beer after this, so I get it. I'm between you and fun. So I was asked to just say, okay, you weren't a commissioner, then you were. How's it going? What's different? What have you learned? The first thing is when you're at an organization like Renew Wisconsin, you follow the PSC, you're engaged in various dockets about renewable energy. And so you kind of, the issues come and go. Maybe there's a few months where there's not really anything on the plate and you sort of just forget about the PSC. And in the meantime, now with the hat on of being at the PSC, you realize there's a lot of other stuff going on besides just the issues from my previous engagement at Renew Wisconsin. Across electricity, there's a lot more to electricity than just renewable electricity. There's a lot more. There's natural gas, the water utility issues. A lot of those are thankfully what we call delegated. We've got a great division administrator and a great team that works through a lot of the issues. They're a little bit more cookie cutter at times, but we do have our fair share of abnormal cases that we have to take up. And then, as I mentioned, broadband, we've had an unbelievable team, a humongous effort to work through all of those grant applications and all of the grantees, and then making sure to follow up with them and give them the assistance they need to get their projects done. There's a lot. This is a state agency that is building the bricks of the future in a lot of different ways. An agency most people have never heard of, but a very important one. So I think that would be my first one. The second really observation is the balance. The balance of safety, reliability, and access with affordability, and then the environmental responsibility, and a recognition that there's often not one answer to a challenge in front of you. Often we're presented with one proposal, and it's our job to review that against the statutes that we have and decide an up or down vote for that proposal. but it is not an easy process because there's a lot of factors that you're balancing. And so I think it's helpful to say that out loud. Folks that follow the PSC know that if they've been following it for many years. But if you're newer and you sort of wonder, well, why didn't they, make this decision that would help X, Y, and Z? Often it's because, well, the implications for one of these others may have outweighed that, that interest in a certain case. So I think just that constant balance is just one thing that has been educational for me and certainly makes the job fun, but also challenging. So looking ahead, I got a few buckets of things that I guess I would throw out to you from my vantage point as some of the biggest challenges that I see coming forward. So I was asked to kind of talk about a little bit of my vision, but I think it's just maybe most helpful to talk about where are the pinch points that I see? And maybe that helps spur some thought for you about how you can solve these problems. First, as I mentioned, is the winter peaks, okay? So the extreme weather, super cold days across the upper Midwest, or as the case last year, all the way down to Texas, and availability, reliability of our resources in those winter peaks. It's a really different challenge than solving for the summer. The wind, when it's minus some degrees, I think it's minus 22, the wind turbines stop rotating to conserve the blades, right? It's just too cold. If they're weatherized and winterized, I know in Texas, they weren't winterized, so they cut out at like 10 or something like that. And that was a challenge last year. The solar plants, the sun is just not very high in the sky in January in Wisconsin. It just is not. So there's going to be some value, but it's not as much as July and August, right? So how are we going to solve that winter peak challenge? I think you loop in the challenge of electrification. If you're going for carbon reductions and you want to tackle water heating, space heating, electrification of vehicles, certainly, how does that change that graph, right? Of when we're using energy throughout the day for 8,760 hours throughout the year at those different temperatures and the needs of the grid. This is going to be a really interesting challenge. And so one of the pieces for me is, how are we going to more holistically plan for this? Some of these comments came into our zero carbon docket. So our zero carbon docket right now is an electric investigation about electricity. Some of the comments came in, and I said this in my comments in that open meeting, that, it's electric and natural gas, right? I mean, how do we plan for both? Because you might not want to make investments in both if they're not both going to be around forever. But when is that point? There's a lot of learning, a lot of understanding to do. I'll put it here later. Is natural gas going to convert to hydrogen? Is there going to be some other zero carbon or low carbon fuel instead of, traditional natural gas? Those are big challenges, but I think thinking about this electric grid, not just when the days are good, but when the days are really hard, what does that look like? So my next big bucket is managing EV charging. So bringing EVs on. There's other policy considerations related to EVs, but managing that charging, hopefully in a way to minimize the cost to upgrade the distribution system. If you got, let's say Madison, everybody goes out and buys an EV and all of a sudden you got 200,000 electric vehicles, and MG&E's got a time of use rate that 11 o'clock PM, your rate goes down and you all get on timer rate. And so your charge point charger at home at 11:01, boom, everybody's EV starts charging. Is that sustainable? I mean, can the grid handle that? These are questions. And so how do you spread that charging out and manage it, right? So that you don't have to, MG&E doesn't have to go out and put in new transformers or distribution grid just to serve you at 11:01 PM when your EV charger starts. So again, I think that's one. managing demand response, distributed energy resources, electric energy storage, to create this seamless, again, 8,760 hours a year float of how our electric system is going to work when you've got a variety of different resources that are providing the energy instead of a baseload coal plant. Regional and national electric transmission planning is a huge topic. There's a lot going on at the federal government about it, all the way down. It's really challenging work, but that's going to be a key. And then my final note for everybody is to be prepared for more innovation and more change, because I think it's coming over the next 10, 20, 30 years. On the energy use side, money. I mean, very few of us use cash anymore. We're mostly on credit cards. And there's I don't know if anybody follows, you've got these cryptocurrencies. Well, they use a lot of electricity to mine those and to move the money in those transactions. I know it's something that they're working on, but there's a big change afoot related to that. If that happens, right? Fundamentally different approach. The blockchain, I know people have talked about the blockchain. Well, that's how we're going to buy and sell and true up our energy sales and our energy use from our battery systems, our DERs. Like maybe it's not going to happen through an electric meter. Maybe it's going to happen in some ledger over here. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff happening there. The metaverse, which can mean a lot of things, but Facebook is now Meta platforms. There's a lot of push into that sort of virtual world. And I think that has implications. Agriculture is always changing. I think that's an area where there's a lot of innovation that's probably going to happen. Did anybody see that John Deere has a fully autonomous self-driving tractor? I mean, a lot of innovation happening in ag that you don't think about. E-commerce and other things. And then on the supply side, I think a big open question of hydrogen and fuel cells and what role can that play? Can it be cost effective? Can it be environmentally friendly? A lot of questions that yet to be worked out. So with that, I used up all my time. I'm long-winded. I do have time for some questions. I'm happy to stay after as well. But thank you very much for the opportunity. Do you want me to read them? I can read them. Okay, I got 3 cards. How is the PSC working with MISO and the impacted state utilities on implementation of FERC Order 2222? I talked about that a little bit. That's the order related to distributed energy resources. So, as I said, our commission is part of the organization of MISO states. So each state has a commissioner that's part of this organization, and it's got a staff. So it's always interfacing with MISO and engaging and figuring out where the states need to weigh in. There's a number of task forces and work groups that OMS has an internal working group. Myself and Chair Carrie Zaleski from Illinois are kind of the commissioner leads. We've got some great staff across our states that are engaging on the issue to try to get our hands around it and figure out what, how we need to engage. The vision and the view that I've put forward is not one that necessarily is favoring DERs over anything else, but just sort of what tools are in the toolbox and how do we make sure that there's not artificial barriers to those tools providing the value when they can provide the value. And that's a way to come at it that I think everybody can get on board with. So that's one of the ways that we're engaging with MISO on that. Okay, second question. If EVs take off as expected, where will all that electricity come from? I think you'd have to convert the residential sector to solar, but there are a lot of barriers to that happening. Is someone doing that high level planning? Well, I think you hit on exactly one of the challenges that I had at the end. And I think thinking about how that works sort of block by block and you build up, I think you come at it both ways, from the distribution system up, the home and distribution system up, as well as top down. Managing the charging to line up as best we can with when generation's available is going to be one possible aspect to solving that. But whoever wrote this question, if you if you want some work, I think there's work out there to help solve that problem. Okay, third and final. Representative Greta Neubauer talked earlier about a bill that would have the PSC take the social cost of carbon into consideration when reviewing projects. What impact would this have at the PSC? I don't know the full implications of that, and luckily I'm kept out of legislative affairs at this point. But in general, if you had a social cost of carbon that set a certain price on carbon, and you applied that to a generator that's going to emit carbon, and based on how much carbon it's going to emit, it's going to have this cost. And so then you could model that, put that into the models that, let's say a generator is going to make power for 3 cents, but the social cost of carbon would add 1 cent. So then instead of saying that resource is going to produce power at 3 cents, you'd say, well, actually it's going to cost 4 cents to make that power per unit. And then everything else, you'd be able to compare how that fits in with any other resource that you might have. And so what impact that possibly, I guess, could have on the margins is that if some resource was at 3 cents and another resource was at 3.5 cents that didn't have any carbon, but then you bump your resource A up to 4 cents, now all of a sudden a different resource would be more cost effective. That's one way that could impact that. And I don't have a lot of knowledge about that, so I'm just guessing, but I think that's about how a carbon tax or something like that would work. Any other questions from the crowd? All right. Heather or someone else? Jeff, who's taking over? Uh-oh.
I don't think we have anything that we have to have up, so.
Well, I think we're just on the screen.
Good enough. Good to see you. It's been too long. Yep, thank you. Thanks, Tyler. Appreciate it. Great to see you and have you here sharing your knowledge and experience here with us on what's happening at the PSC. Well, we've reached our wrap-up segment, and I want to first of all just let you know that we had to pivot not that long ago to get to a hybrid model for this summit, and the staff went through an awful lot to make that happen. And then we had some casualties this week, and they couldn't all be here. So that's why you're seeing board members like me up front and helping out in different things. So I really want to thank the Renew staff, the board, and the volunteers like Jody's mom, who showed up to help with the registration today. So thank you guys very much. Really appreciate it. I'd like to thank the Monona Terrace for all the support, making this in-person and virtual summit work so well. Occasionally we have a little snafu with the technical stuff at times, but given everything and all the challenges going on right now, it went really well, and we really appreciate this beautiful facility and the staff that supports it. We had 378 in-person attendees today, 133 that were virtual, and that was as of 11 o'clock this morning. I think there were like 50 more that came on virtually after that. So that's a real success. I don't think it's the most we've ever had at a conference. We might have had one or maybe two that were a little bit more than that, but not much. And hopefully next year we can get everybody together. We may still, we'll see, but we might still have a hybrid option just for the convenience in some cases too. But that was really a success. So appreciate everybody attending. This event doesn't, this is, you make this event happen. You're being here. You are the champions of our renewable energy, and this is our chance to network with people that are trying to achieve the same things and find partnerships and synergies. So thank you for being here. I'd like to invite, I think there's a representative from JCG Land Services. I think it's Rob Welch to come up to announce the results of the raffle. And while he's doing that, I'd also like to thank all of our sponsors, especially our presenting sponsors, Green Penny, Invenergy, NextEra, for making the event possible. Okay, we need that funding and sponsorship, and we appreciate it. And for all of you that are participating virtually or on a computer or on the phone or here in person, we really appreciate you being here. So I'll let you stand up. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'll be real short. My name's Rob Welch with JCG Land, and this is Cliff Barker also. We just wanted to thank you guys for having us here. We are land acquisition agents, recently opened an office in Madison. we have our drawing. Brian Bubb, are you in here? All right, Brian. Well, congratulations again. We appreciate you guys being here. If you attend conferences and you see JCG, we're usually the rods guys, so we appreciate you.
Okay, a couple other things here. Let's see here, recordings, before I forget, recordings will be available in a few weeks, and we will send an email when they're available to watch on demand. And I know there were other questions in these sessions that should be answered on the online tool. So if you didn't get a question answered and you were virtual, look there, and they should be getting those out as well. So hopefully you have an answer, and you can contact us if something falls through there. Let's see. Yeah, it's an exciting time. There's a lot going on. If you didn't pick that up today in the space of renewable energy, I was here, I don't know, probably 10 years ago or 11 years ago, and it was maybe 100 people, and it was a nice event. It's so much more now, and there's just so much more happening. Tyler's laughing because he remembers what that was like. It's just exciting to see it, and I'm grateful to see the change and see the engagement by so many different people in so many different sectors, and in our political leadership too, on both sides of the aisle, working hard to try to advance this. So now we can carry this excitement over. We have a happy hour out back. Hopefully a number of you can stay. If you didn't meet with somebody you want to talk to, this is a chance. You should have on the back of your tags, there should be a ticket for a free drink. And what was that? Question. Oh, thank you. So there should be some fun. Stay around. Hopefully you can stay a little bit with us and talk some more. And so we'll officially close our 11th annual Renewable Energy Policy Summit. Please join me in a round of applause for the incredible team that made this happen, and for all of you